Now here are 4 problems on cost behavior. Now it's very important that you understand that a variable cost is a cost that changes in total. In total, that's why it's called a variable cost, in direct proportion to changes in level of activity. So therefore, it also remains constant on a unit basis. So knowing that will help us predict what it will be. So here we have Sharp Company. Annual production costs incurred in the manufacturing process at 2,000 units are these costs. Now, one cost, utilities, is a mixed cost, and the fixed portion is 300. That's just utilities. So now, calculate what the cost would be for each one at 2,400. So for A, we have direct material. Now, the cost per unit of direct material is $4,000 at 2,000 units. So therefore, the cost per unit is $2 per unit. That's the cost per unit, the variable cost per unit. So therefore, the direct material cost at 2,400 units would be 2,400 times $2 per unit. And that would equal $4,800. Okay. Now B is also, take a look. It is a variable cost, direct labor. And therefore, we figure out that on a unit basis, if it's a variable cost, it will remain constant on a unit basis. So let's figure out what it is on a unit basis. And that equals $7 per unit. And if it's a $7 per unit, then direct labor, 2,400 units times $7. And that would equal 16,800. Now utilities. Now this is different. Utilities is 1,000. So of that 1,000, 300 is fixed. Therefore, 1,000 minus 300, 700 is variable. So therefore, how does it vary? Well, 700 divided by 2,000, well, it varies on a, let's see, okay, 700 divided by 2,000 equals 0.35 per unit. Therefore, the variable cost for utilities at 2,400 would be 2,400 times 0.35 plus the fixed cost of 300. And therefore, that should equal, let me see, 1,140. All right. D, well, D is easy. D is rent. And rent is fixed, so that's 2,200. It's fixed at 2,000 units, and it will be fixed at 2,400 units. E, indirect labor, is variable. So therefore, I figure it out. It's going to be 3,600 total, divided by number of units, 2,000, and I get $1.80 per unit. So therefore, at 2,400 units, times $1.80, and we would have 4,320. Okay. Lastly, supervisor salary fixed. So F is the same. It's fixed at 2,000. It's fixed at 2,400. So it's 1,300. And that's the first question. The second question, Reef Motel has the following monthly telephone records and costs. So here is the activity and here is the cost. Now remember, we have to break, these are variable costs. These are partly variable, partly fixed. They're not variable because they don't double and they change, so they're not fixed. So these are mixed costs, and they're telling us to put them into the high and low. And what you want is the change in cost over the change in activity will give you the variable cost. All right, now we want the cost at the high activity. So when I look here, my high activity is 3,500 and I want the cost 4,100. And my low activity is 2,500 and the cost at 2,500 is 3. So the change in cost, therefore the variable cost is equal to the change in cost, 4,100 minus 3,000, over the change in activity, which is 3,500 at the high and 2,500 at the low. And that will equal $1.10 per unit. Okay, now the fixed cost. Well, the fixed cost, we can take the 4,100 and we say, all right, we have 4,100 at the high. The variable cost then would be, what was the activity at the high? 3,500 times $1.10. And therefore, that would equal 4,100. That would equal 250. No, I'm sorry. 3,500 times $1.10 will equal 3,850. So if the total cost is 4,100 and the variable cost is 3,850, then the fixed would be that. Let's do it at the low. The total cost at the low was 3,000. We figured out the variable portion, 2,500 times $1.10, and we get 2,750. The fixed cost is fixed. Fixed at one level, fixed at the other level. So if we were to formalize that, we would say that y equals a plus bx. That's the equation for a straight line. A is the fixed portion, b is the variable portion, and x is the number of units. The next question. Fern Company gathered the following information on power costs and factory machine usage. So here's the activity and here are the costs. And they want me or us or you and all of us to break it into its fixed and variable portion. All right, so we want the high activity, and the high activity is 19,000. And we want the low activity, 15,000. So the change in cost, variable cost. To figure out variable cost, we take the change in cost. So we take the high, 48,000, the cost at the high, and the cost at the low, 40,000. And we take the activity at the high, 19,000. And the activity at the low, 15,000. So the change in cost over the change in activity, and that will give me $2 per unit. All right, now the fixed cost. All right, fixed cost. The high, 48,000. Of the 48, we figure out that the variable portion, the activity, 19,000 times the cost, which is $2 per unit, or per hour, in this case, would be 38. So therefore, if the variable cost is 38, the fixed would be 10. If it's 10 at that level, it would be 10 at the other level. At the other level, the low cost was 40. The activity was 15,000, so therefore the variable portion of it would be 30, and the fixed with that. So therefore, my equation, a plus bx, is equal to A being 10,000 plus $2 times activity. And so therefore they're saying, all right, let's assume the activity of 18,000. Well, then it would be 10,000 times $2 times 18,000. This is C part of the question, and that will give me 46,000. So I would predict that at an activity level of 18,000 here, that my total power cost would be 46,000. And that's how we use it. We use the high-low to break it into fixed and variable, but we also have a model to predict what the mixed cost will be in the future given a certain level of activity. Zeta Lambda fraternity has an annual alumni golfing outing. Local caterer provides lunch and a tent. The fraternity pays a flat fee for the tent and an additional amount for each person served. However, in the past, the brothers have never seemed to be able to determine what the caterer is going to charge. So they gathered the information of the past 4 years. So therefore, here is the activity, and that's the attendance. Here is the cost. So basically, we want to break it out into the fixed and variable. So we then look at the activity. The high is $250, cost is $660. So variable cost, $6,600 is the cost, and the activity is $250. And at the low, it would be $175, and the cost is $4,800. So $4,800 and minus $175. So that's the change in cost over the change in activity gives me the variable portion. And when I figure that out, I get $24 per person. Okay. Now, what would be the fixed costs? Well, let's take it at the high. Let's say, okay, $660. So the variable portion then would be $250, the activity, times 24, which would be $6,000. So the variable cost would be 6. Or I'm sorry, the fixed cost would be 6. If it's fixed at that high level, it'll be the same at the low level. And at the low, with the activity of 175 times 24, the variable portion of the total cost of $4,800 is $4,200. Therefore, the fixed cost is $600. How much is the charge for the tent? Well, you see the high-low compute the food cost and the tent cost, the fixed cost and the variable cost.